That's when I really became, the best player I could, when I understood the things Jacques was trying to teach me as far as not giving up chances to the other team, being smart with when you joined the offense and tried to create offense. And I think, I know it made me a very, a better player going forward and a much more valuable player to my teams from there on in, that I could kind of be trusted, be responsible, whether we're up by a goal, down by a goal, in the game 7 of a Stanley Cup playoff game. I became a better player because of what Jacques taught me. It wasn't easy. It was a frustrating process to go through, but probably the most important thing that happened to me.
That was Hockey Hall of Fame defenseman Scott Niedermeyer, and you are listening to episode 148 of the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolin. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hey there, welcome to or welcome back to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolin. I am your host, Jason Podolin, and you're here for episode 147, and today's a good one. One of the best ones as far as somebody who's made a huge impact on the game over their career, a Hockey Hall of Famer by the name of Scott Niedermeyer. He is one of these guys that, like, the true introduction is like so long, it kind of takes your breath away. But I think we need to do it for two reasons. One, because his resume is so special. What he accomplished in the game is absolutely remarkable. But two, and maybe some of you are going to be rattled by this, but we don't talk about much of his resume at all. Like, I don't talk about his Stanley Cups. I don't talk about his Norris Trophy. I don't talk about the Olympic golds. We have a conversation, an Up My Hockey conversation about hockey, about his adversity, about his insights, about his lessons. So kind of flipped the table on him. He said after we stopped the conversation that there was a lot of questions that he'd never been asked before, and he really enjoyed the conversation. So I'm glad it was a breath of fresh air for him. And if you are, somebody who follows Scott Niedermeyer or a fan of him, perhaps this will be a very new discussion for you to listen to, a very new type of interview for him. And maybe we'll find out a few things that you never knew before. And for those of you who would like to know about, where his favorite place to eat on the road is, or what his favorite memory of an Olympic gold is, there are many, many conversations out there that I'm sure you can find on podcasts to hear those stories. But yeah, let's give it a whirl here to try and share with you where this guy is at. He was a Kamloops Blazer originally, where he won a Memorial Cup and where he was also drafted 3rd overall from that organization. He also won a World Junior Gold medal as a junior there playing for Kamloops. He has a World Cup championship under his belt. That's very similar for some of you younger listeners to the Four Nations Cup that's coming up here. It would be a best-on-best tournament outside of an Olympic Games. He won gold at the World Championships with Canada. He won 2 Olympic gold medals. He won 4 Stanley Cups, 3 with New Jersey, where he was captain, and 1 with Anaheim, where he was also a captain. He has won a Conn Smythe, the most valuable player of the playoffs. He has won a Norris Trophy as the best defenseman in the NHL. He was also a runner-up 2 times for that award. He was a first-team All-Star 3 times, a second-team All-Star 1 time. He played in 6 All-Star games, and he is also a member of the Hockey Hall of Fame. Now, that's a mouthful. That is a very accomplished individual. And if you never had a chance to see him play, he was one of the best skaters you will ever see. Really, really fun to watch skate. He also had a brother that I played with, Robbie Niedermeyer, who was also a very, very high draft pick, who played in Florida and had a long NHL career himself. So obviously there's some athleticism in that family, hailing from Cranbrook, BC. So I came across, as far as like the background, I never knew Scott or played with him, but he does live in Penticton now, and he is involved with the Okanagan Hockey Academy. That's where one of his sons plays, and he was on the bench during one of the games, which was funny to see Scott Niedermeyer just kind of simply opening a door for the players there at the U17 prep, or maybe it's U18 that he was involved with. And yeah, I was kind of I was laughing under my breath. Was wondering if anyone in the crowd knew that a two-time gold medalist Norris Trophy winner was opening the gate across the ice surface there. But anyway, Scott is very underassuming. He's super mellow, super chill, very humble, very very gracious, and it was fun having a chat with him. So I will stop with the introduction. I know you now, if you didn't before, know who Scott Niedermeyer is, and it was a really pleasure and a blessing to have him on. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Hockey Hall of Famer Scott Niedermeyer. All right, here we are, Up My Hockey Podcast. I have no idea what episode this needs, but welcome to the Up My Hockey Podcast, Scott Niedermeyer.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
For a guy as as acclaimed as you are, you were one of the easiest guys to actually hook up and get onto this. So I want to thank you for that. It wasn't a pain in the ass. Sometimes hockey players, you know how we can be. It's tough to track them down.
Trust me, I don't know, however this worked out smoothly. I can be pretty difficult sometimes. So whatever happened, it went smoothly. That was great. So
awesome. Yeah, I mean, we don't really have a connection, but I don't know if you know, I played with your brother a little bit in Florida. So like I do have a connection to Rob, and through that kind of have been following your family from a distance. So it was pretty cool to be from Western Canada, WHL grads, and to watch what you guys were able to do. So congratulations on that. What's Rob doing these days?
Yeah, he's actually moved back to Cranbrook. He's a farmer now, a rancher. He's got about 70 head of cattle out on a 500-acre piece of property, and enjoying it. He loves it, loves to be outside, loves animals. So he's doing well. 3 young daughters, a fair bit of soccer in his life. They're soccer players. So he's out there coaching a bit of soccer.
Something about that doesn't surprise me at all, that he's out on a farm with 70 head of cattle. That's super cool. I'm sure he's happy as happy can be.
Yeah, for sure.
That's wild. Maybe we'll just start there. I said that I don't want to like break down your career, but I think, your journey is super relevant to probably the perspective you have and what you're doing now as a coach and helping your own sons, go through the game. Kamloops, there's been so many Kamloops Blazer guests on my show that I'm sure maybe some of my listeners are getting sick of it, but it's pretty wild, quite frankly, like how good that team was for so long, and the success that they had, and how so many players from that team went on and had great success other places. How did you get involved with the Blazers? I guess you were a list guy because the draft didn't exist then?
No, that's right. There was no draft. I didn't know a lot about the WHL, really. Growing up in Cranbrook, BC, we had junior B hockey there, and that's what I watched. That was what the older guys were playing. And I think maybe I'd been to a game, maybe down in Spokane, been to a WHL game down there at some point. But, when time kind of rolled around, I think I'd bounced around a couple lists, when I was 14, 15 kind of thing, on and off, and ended up on Kamloops' list. The summer before I could go play, Bob Brown and Ken Hitchcock came down to Cranbrook to visit and kind of, I guess, sell their program and talk about what they can do and have done. And I think that did impress my parents. It was a different world back then. We didn't really know a whole lot. We know that they'd had good teams there, good players had come through Kamloops prior to that time. And at that point, my parents seemed sold on it, and ended up going there with another friend from Cranbrook, Jarrett Bouquet. We both took off at 16 years old to go play in Kamloops. So that was kind of nice to have someone along, heading off into a new adventure. So and his dad, actually, back to development, his dad was our coach pretty much all the way through minor hockey. We were lucky to have him. He was a gym teacher in the high school, and just a real good coach, made it fun, taught us a lot about the game, and the right values, I think, is probably maybe the most common thread that I was fortunate to be part of with coaches was, sort of team first, play for your teammates, do what you can to help them, to help the team. That was sort of always the approach that I was involved in, playing for different teams.
Yeah, that's I didn't realize you did come with Bouquet because I mean, I know you know, but he's part of he's part of an agency now, and he
Yeah.
was a guest on the program as well. So I
Oh,
did
was
talk
he?
to
Okay.
Jay.
He's a
Yeah,
better
yeah,
storyteller than me. So
yeah. Well, he was a lot of fun to chat with. Yeah, no, and he's doing big things right now. They're doing great there. So you stepped in at 16, and had a heck of a season. You know, were you said you hopped on and off some lists. You know, it's nice to kind of go back to that time and now a Hockey Hall of Famer and a Norris Trophy winner. You know, back then you were a kid from Cranbrook who was just playing hockey. Like, were you just playing hockey? Were you crushing everywhere you were going at that point? Like, what was the trajectory like for you at that time? If you could look back at that.
yeah, I mean, no, for sure. I mean, I was doing well. I was probably one of the better players on our team. I could always skate well. That always helped me. Especially at a young age. When you can skate, it gives you a big advantage out there. So that was always a strength of mine. So I knew I could have success playing hockey, at least in the level I was at. Playing minor hockey in Cranbrook. And traveling around just a little bit we did, mainly in the Kootenays of BC and over to Southern Alberta, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, and Calgary. That was kind of our world, our hockey world. So, I had some confidence. I knew I had some talent to play hockey. I didn't really know what that meant to go play in the WHL, though. In my mind, it seemed it was just a part of a small little local world, and I was having success there. And did that mean I could go play in the WHL? I wasn't really sure. So when I ended up going there, and having a bit of success, we had a good veteran team. A lot of the other young guys, unfortunately, didn't see a lot of ice time. As 16-year-olds, we actually had, I think, 5 or 6 16-year-olds at my year. And a lot of them didn't play a whole lot. And I was fortunate that I did get to play. I think that's important, to be on the ice, to be playing, to have experiences, good and bad, to learn and become a better player.
Right. The the idea there of like going to Kamloops as a 16-year-old. I mean, I went to Spokane as a 16-year-old too, and it's a whole new world, and it's a whole new life, really. And that transition can be challenging in a lot of ways. As you said, the other 4 of you weren't playing very much, which makes it that much more challenging. What was your biggest challenge that year from a personal perspective, you going to a new city like that at such a young age?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it was just hard moving away from home for the first time. I think that's probably what stands out. I think I was fortunate in the sense that I got to, play and feel a part of it. I imagine for those young guys, the other young guys that I was with that weren't playing as much, that's just an extra challenge to kind of deal with. And that would be tough because they were the best players on their teams, the year before. And all of a sudden, they're in and out of the lineup and watching some hockey games. And that is a tough position to be in, to kind of keep that excitement, enthusiasm for playing the game, and that passion for it, not get discouraged, at least for any length of time. It's going to be hard over the short, time to not get discouraged. But I was fortunate, probably just moving away from home. Like I said, moving away with a good friend of mine, I think helped a lot, that we kind of went there together, and that eased the transition for sure.
So for a lot of guys that I've had on this, I mean, and Jerome X Blazer was one of them. Like the biggest adversity that he felt that he faced when he really looked back on everything was his 16-year-old year in Kamloops. You know, like he thought about leaving, thought about quitting. You know, there was all these kind of ideas because he didn't play a lot at 16 and it was so new. Was there? It doesn't sound like your 16-year-old year was that traumatic. If you did look back now at the entirety of your career, what was the hardest point for you to get through?
Yeah, no, I was fortunate. My 16-year-old year went very smoothly, all things considered. For most players that age, there is going to be some bumps in the road. It's a big step. And I was fortunate to play with an older defenseman that had been in the league, a big, strong guy. We had other veterans back on the blue line. So it was a pretty good spot for me to kind of just slide in and do what I could out on the ice. I would probably say for me, it was probably about 3 or 4 years into my NHL career where I probably had sort of the biggest challenge and the most frustration with the game. Jacques Lemaire was the coach in New Jersey at the time. The first couple of years, his second year in New Jersey, we ended up winning a Stanley Cup. And think that was my third season in the NHL. It was a shortened season with a lockout. So in those first few years, you're excited to be there. You're enjoying every second of it. Then you win a Stanley Cup. I mean, things are just cruising along pretty darn good. Really better than most people for sure, obviously. And after that, Jacques kept demanding playing a certain way, and it was a little different than I had in my mind. A defense first kind of approach, and I was like every kid wanting to score goals and get points. That was sort of what I wanted to do. And, so we, kind of butted heads a bit. I was trying to play a certain way, and he had different ideas. And there was probably a stretch for a couple of years where, I was being pretty stubborn, and he obviously knew what he was talking about. So he wasn't going to change his mind. And not that I was out of the lineup, but there were times where I was, sitting on the bench for the last part of a period or the last part of a game, if I had maybe given up a 2-on-1 or made a bad decision and given up a chance to the other team, that type of thing. So looking back, I probably wish I would have learned that quicker, because now I tell the story a lot. That's probably the toughest and most frustrating part of my career. And you've probably found this with a lot of your players you interview, but probably the most important. That's when I really became the best player I could, when I understood the things Jacques was trying to teach me as far as not giving up chances to the other team, being smart with when you joined the offense and tried to create offense. And I think, I know it made me a very, a better player going forward, and a much more valuable player to my teams from there on in, that I could kind of be trusted, be responsible, whether we're up by a goal, down by a goal, in the game 7 of a Stanley Cup playoff game. I became a better player because of what Jacques taught me. It wasn't easy. It was a frustrating process to go through, but probably the most important thing that happened to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is really valuable insight there, just for everyone listening, because here you are, not a Hockey Hall of Famer at that point, right? But a future one, and still obviously a very accomplished player to that point, a 3rd overall draft pick, somebody who stepped into the NHL, didn't have to, be in the minors at all, had won a Stanley Cup. And now there's resistance between you and your coach about really a player identity, a little bit of a crisis, right? About what you wanted to be and what he wanted you to be.
For sure.
And boy, this happens all the time. I'm sure you see it, on the levels with your son right now. When I'm working with players, that's one of the main things we talk about is how do you provide the most value, and really understanding that and wanting to adopt it. Yet there's massive amounts of mental resistance when it comes to that. For you, like, do you remember what that moment was as far as the breakthrough was, where like you kind of just let go?
Yeah, that's a good question, because when I look back on it now, I just can't believe, it took me, a year and a half, 2 years to sort of battle through all that to kind of get to a point where I was like, okay, I kind of get it now, and let's kind of move forward. And maybe it wasn't just one moment. It probably was a gradual sort of progression of me just kind of understanding it more and more and starting to live it in my game. When I was on the ice, and maybe when I started doing it more, probably Jacques saw it and probably maybe gave me a little more benefit of the doubt. So it was probably a 2-way street, just in any relationship, there's kind of managing it and figuring it out. And I'm sure that's kind of how it played out. So, again, like I said, in hindsight, it's hard to believe that it took that long. And especially now that I know how valuable, that kind of mindset and understanding how to play the game to win, to help your team have success, really is, I guess, what the bottom line was there. And I wouldn't trade any of this team success we had for any sort of personal thing at all. So I'm glad I had Jacques as a coach and went through that. And like I said, I think probably without that, who knows if I make it to the Hall of Fame. Really, I think a big reason I probably got selected to be in the Hall of Fame was because of being part of successful teams.
Right.
So would that have happened without that? Who knows?
Yeah, such an interesting. I mean, I love that discussion, especially in today's day and age, where there seems to be more of a focus on individuality and that personal success. We can talk about the reasons why, probably ad nauseum, right? The highlight reel era, I call it, is you see these goals, and they have their Instagram feeds, and that's kind of what keeps feeding the system. And the team play that you said you grew up on, I think isn't quite as valued in most situations. Yet, here you are saying that was one of the biggest keys for you, yet you did have your own personal mental resistance with it at the time, because we do want to flourish and thrive in a way that we think that we can and are able to. I know that's been a discussion I've heard, and I'm sure you've obviously heard it numerous times too, about yourself, that your numbers potentially could have been a lot greater had you been in a different situation. Maybe you don't have the 4 cups, like you say, right? Maybe you don't have some of these other things. How do you, like, what's the advice for someone out there trying to balance that? You know, the idea of making people better, being part of a system, maybe taking your foot away or off the gas from the personal production. You know, how do we do that?
Yeah, I think that's just part of maturing. I would say I think that was my journey through that. I was probably no different, like I said earlier about it. Any other kid, I love to score goals. The prettier they were, the more exciting they were. I mean, all of that, right? I mean, that's a great part of hockey for sure. But at the same time, winning, sitting on the bench, sitting in the dressing room with guys that you're going out to compete with, and just looking across and knowing that they're going to do everything they can to help your team win. If they're going to stand up for you, as a smaller offensive guy, that, played with plenty of guys that were out there to sort of make sure the other big guys were staying out of my way, at least partially, and when you kind of have that bond with your teammates, I don't know how many goals personally could ever make up for that type of experience. And when you win, you sit there and you realize, like, that guy played with broken ribs, and, he went out there and he was blocking shots and, doing things that were very uncomfortable, yet helping our team. And, that to me is the pinnacle of hockey. Maybe pinnacle of life. I don't know, in many sense, helping each other out, working together, as people, rather than individual things. I mean, for sure, individual things are nice. And when we do, they feel good. But they don't feel as good as that type of success you have with a group, when you're pulling, on the same rope in the same direction.
Yeah, I love you saying that. I mean, I think that's the best part about hockey. When I look back on it, of course, I love scoring the goals and I love doing that stuff. But the idea of hockey and what it really allows you to do and allows you to learn when it's done right, like when it's done well. I just, there's nothing better than a team sport like hockey when it comes to that. And I think, to me, it speaks to I'm going to use the word, like, male masculine aspect of us too, right? Like the brotherhood, the bond, like the physical challenge. I mean, all these things that I think speak to us on some innate level. It allows you to come together and really feel like you're doing something special. And I never experienced on the level you did, but going to a final in any league, or getting there, it's a journey, right? And you got a bond. Yep. And it's a totally fun one to look back on. What you talked about culture, and you talked about the value system and the coaches that you're grateful for. I'm sure that comes from your parents as well. I did know Robbie a little bit, and you guys always seemed to me like a really grounded group. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Humble, grounded, grateful. And I imagine that comes from mom and dad in some capacity. What's the message to parents out there, if that is true? Like, how much can we instill in our kids to be those team players that we're talking about?
Yeah, I wish I knew that answer to that as a parent, but I mean, I think it's just, stressing, the things we've talked about, hard work, being a good teammate, those type of things. They're all, they're old messages, but they're good messages. I don't think they'll ever go out of style, or, we'll ever find better ones. My parents, my mom, grew up on a farm, so she sort of had that background of hard work and, needing to get things done. And my dad was from Saskatchewan as well. And, they just really wanted us to go do our best, work as hard as we could, be a good person, be a good teammate. That was really their message, quite simple. And like I said, I was fortunate to have coaches right from youth hockey into junior hockey that really were focused on that and understood the importance of that to help our team succeed, and win hockey games. So I was kind of always around that. And, part of my personality, I think, helps with that a little bit too. I think there's some times where I'm not really thinking about sort of how to act, or, it's just kind of who I am. Yeah. But I know I learned a lot from, parents, coaches, all the way through. And I always had, great sort of leadership and mentorship right from the get-go, for sure.
Did mom or dad get too involved in the hockey side of hockey?
Yeah, I mean, I think my dad was the manager of the team, wasn't a coach, didn't play a whole lot of hockey himself. My mom was an athlete, and they were always on the road, and on the road trips with us and helping out. I think my mom actually was the president of minor hockey for a little period of time in Cranbrook and involved in that fashion. So not really on the ice, unless it was maybe on the pond or different ways like that. But they were involved, they were helping, which was great. And we were fortunate that they did sort of support us like they did, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, I guess where I was more going with that is like breaking down your game or like helping you
No,
with that type of stuff. Yeah.
no, I don't think they really felt they had the knowledge to really do that. I think they could tell if you were working hard. They knew if you were working and skating and kind of ready to play. I mean, I think that was probably their focus more than anything, nothing technical. Really, I don't remember ever talking about much technical with my parents at all. But it was about hard work and sort of being ready to play and play hard.
How do you balance that now as a dad? I know your boys are going through, and I mean, of course, the game. You can also see effort and work. Do you have a hard time balancing how much to give?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it a lot, because I could probably not stop talking for 24 hours a day, really, about it if I wanted to. You want to let them have fun, and I think at the end of the day, and even looking back on my experiences, I think. There is so much out there now, which is great. But at the same time, I think you just have to live through stuff. I mean, I think you have to fail, you have to trip and fall and pick yourself up and learn lessons, kind of the old fashioned way, the hard way. So I think I've learned that maybe a little bit by just, being a parent. You tell kids what to do or, and show them the path, and they decide they're taking the other one, and they need to learn the hard lesson. So I don't think coaching, or and hockey's any different. I think those are the powerful lessons over the long run. And if there's a consistent messages and different things like that kind of go along with the truth they find for themselves, it's probably the way they get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Like for me, I try my best to not offer anything unless they ask for it, meaning my own boys, like not necessarily my clients.
Yeah.
Yet the one thing that I will offer without them asking is usually if I do see some type of an effort scenario, like that's sort of where my standard is. And even that, like I try and let them come to me. I'm not going to bark it down their throat, but that's my firm line. And then the other one is like, yeah, I'd love to help, but I don't want to feel like they're being attacked with, tactical, whatever trivia kind of deal. Is that like for those out there listening, did you feel that's a good recipe as far as, your value system as a family? I mean, I do love, I compete and effort for me are big ones. And those are the ones that I kind of like are non-negotiables. Other than that, there's lots of ways to play hockey. There's lots of different avenues to play it. But if you want to actually be a hockey player, those are going to be my standards, and we'll figure out the rest.
Yeah. No, I think so. I for sure there is lots of different ways to do it. I mean, especially in today's game, different systems, and there's so much more than there was when I was a kid. And these guys have grown up with it, and they sort of digest it more and think about it more in that sense. So I would say so. I think it is hard to know the line for sure. I think some kids maybe will come out and ask and talk. My kids, some of them are a little like me, where they're a bit quieter, and maybe they would just not even think about asking. And in their head, they're kind of thinking, well, maybe dad will tell me something. So, what, I really don't have an answer for it. I guess in the big picture, if I look at it, I think what I would probably say is the most important thing. I mean, do they really want to be out there and they're enjoying it? And I think if they are, the rest of that, giving them some advice and encouraging them to work hard, I think that'll all be accepted quite easily if they are out there for their own reasons, ultimately, I would say.
Going to take one short break from the podcast to talk to you about the UMH68. Everything right now is UMH68 invitational for me. And that means that we are sending out invites right now for my invitational event that is coming to Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and again in British Columbia. We are looking and inviting the top 68 players in their birth year that we're covering for these events. And it is really an Up My Hockey based event. It's focusing on the development of the person as well as the hockey player. I do believe in holistic development model. I believe as we improve our personal skills, we will improve our athleticism and our hockey skills and the mindset required to be our best. And that's what the weekend is all about, bringing a best on best experience to these young athletes to provide an opportunity for them to grow their awareness, to grow the idea of what high performance means and peak potential. And they can walk away with new relationships, hopefully a new, deeper passion for the game, and an awesome lessons that will last their hockey journey and hopefully a lifetime. So really excited about what's going on. We're doing the 2012s in Alberta. We're also doing the 2012s in Saskatchewan, and we are doing the 2011s in Manitoba. And that's on top of the events that I have previously ran in British Columbia. The 2012s we're covering this year, and 2011s in Vernon, British Columbia. So super exciting. If you are a coach or if you are a parent in any one of those provinces, please check out my website, upmyhockey.com. If you feel your player is someone who should be at this event, or even if you just simply want them at the event and would like to have their name put on the radar, by all means, please do. Again, coaches, managers out there, this is a hockey network. We are out watching games, but we all know how much ground there is to cover, and we are relying on a referral system, networking system, people who know good players that need to be invited to this. So if you are somebody who knows a player who would love the experience and who deserves an experience like this, by all means, check out the website. There's a section called the watch list, and all you have to do is fill out the watch list, and then you are guaranteed to at least be on the radar. So those invites are coming out now. The events range from end of May through to the end of June. Be sure to watch for where they're coming for, and it's a really exciting development with Up My Hockey and a way to celebrate the game, celebrate the players, showcase the players, and also to advance them as people and players. So really exciting, real exciting for me to be involved in. So without further ado, let's bring you back to the conversation with Scott Niedermeyer. You mentioned being a good teammate, and that's an old message, but one that doesn't get old. I like asking that question in a little different way, and even diving a little deeper on what does that mean? Because I think for a teenager that's listening to this right now, or even a junior player that's listening to this right now, might not really understand what that means. And I think it does probably mean different things to different people. But when you say that, if you think of like one of the best teammates you ever had, or like what they would encompass and what would qualify to get them that accolade from you, what would they be doing?
Yeah, I think it's probably a broad thing, a broad spectrum of things they would be doing for sure, right? Like, I guess first and foremost, I would think, when the game's going on, I mean, are they committed to the team in a sense of positional play, making good decisions? I guess I could argue against myself when I was a defenseman and, maybe giving up 2-on-1s or going offensive when I shouldn't have. And giving the other team chances. I would probably think my teammates didn't think I was a great teammate because I was, costing the team or potentially costing the team by the way I was playing. So I would sort of say that is one of the things. Are you working and competing for the team? And then the simple things of the support and encouragement that you can give each other during a game. After a goal, you go back and, tap the goalie's pads and say, oh, don't worry about it. We'll go get one back. And, or a guy makes a mistake and you're supportive and, sticking together. You're not, blaming someone else for your trials and tribulations on the ice. I think that's another one. Yeah. You're in it together and you got to find ways to make it work, support each other, help each other. So I think the list is long for sure.
Do you think when I'm dealing with younger athletes, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is like helping somebody when they're down, which I mean, there's a nice virtue to that, right? For sure.
Yeah.
And the sentiment is nice. I don't know how well that actually works in real time. If you've made a mistake and you're on the bench and, somebody comes up and come on, like, it depends on who you're talking to. But I won't discourage somebody from trying to help a teammate ever. Yeah. But I do think like when I challenge players, sometimes I ask them like, how do you feel that you make other people better? Yeah. Right. Like, so that's like an open-ended question. And I think when we think along those lines, potentially the conversation sort of changes, right? Because that does mean on the ice, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do you make your wingers better, your D partner better, or your goalie better, right? By
Yeah.
how you're playing.
Yeah.
In the dressing room, maybe some of your behaviors, like are you making people feel good about themselves, in
Yeah.
the room, off the ice? Are you complimentary of their value to the team and what they offer? And I think the celebrating of success is maybe the hardest one in an environment like hockey, where you're competing against each other, maybe at a younger level, where you actually, you're all trying to move up the chain, the ladder,
Yeah.
everyone's wanting ice,
Sure.
to really be authentic in your celebration of someone else doing well, and
Yeah.
understanding that, that doesn't diminish your opportunity to do well yourself. Can you maybe speak to the success of others one, and how you
Yeah.
handled that, or how you would suggest people, navigate that?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And the reality of being a young player, a young kid, for sure, everybody's trying to move up and, get on the power play. And so I think you're always dealing with sort of those feelings. I guess I would suggest, those feelings are probably natural and part of being a human. But maybe they don't need to be the first ones that come out of your mouth or you act on. There's times to recognize that that's not going to be constructive for anybody, for me or the other player or the team. And just kind of, get back out there when you get the opportunity to do your best. That's ultimately what's going to help you advance and get where you want to get as an individual player, which is a fair goal as an individual, to move up and have success. But I would say, having some of those good tendencies of being a good teammate will bode well for you as just as much maybe as scoring goals or, getting points. By coaches will recognize that and say, you know what, we really want this guy in the team. I know I've played with many a teammate that probably were on the team much more for that than they were for their skills or their goal scoring or point totals. It was their willingness to support their teammates, to stand up for their teammates, to do the tough jobs. Maybe their willingness to not, complain when they weren't on the first power play or they were on the fourth line, and they took pride in it and found a way to feel good about that type of role. I mean, I think those are just part of maturing as a human and a player. And for a young kid to get there does take time. You're gonna, it's a natural thing to be a bit selfish, I think, for sure.
No, I think that's a great point. Luke Buss is a client of mine. He's now with Wisconsin, and he came on the show, and he talked about kind of our time together. And one of the things that I thought was really cool about his last season was one of the things he wanted to work on. And this kid's a great kid, by the way, like fantastic. And you can tell probably by what I'm going to tell you, to have the self-awareness to tell me, always felt that I was a good teammate, but I wanted to be a great teammate.
Yeah.
Right. And so he never felt that he was really selfish. But the one thing that he wanted to work on was the idea, like, that's like, if he was on the bench, let's say, right, and somebody else scored on the power play, or this type of scenario where he would feel a little bit bad about himself. Super honest, right? Like, what an honest thing to say, and what a mature thing to say. But he didn't want to be like that, and he wanted to celebrate. And so he, through intentionality, right, and through the idea of recognizing that, you know what, this doesn't hurt my chances of success personally. It has no bearing on it, right? Like, he got to the tangible, pragmatic understanding of that, and then was able to move forward to be authentically celebratory, with his teammate. And that was one of the biggest moves that he made in his own game, which allowed him to flourish on the ice. Like, it was like really one of the big breakthroughs. And so, like, when I love talking about personal development, and again, this idea of hockey as a team and what makes it so great, and so he became a great teammate, and in the process scored more goals. Go figure. In the process was more productive. In the process got to Wisconsin as an NCAA, scholarship ad. And so I just love seeing that. I think with intention, we can do that. And so I just wanted to, add on to your point there, that this is something that you can improve. You can be better at it.
No, and I think, in a bigger sense, even like for me personally, thinking sort of, when was I playing my best? It was sort of when you didn't have all this other worry, and you're thinking about that, and you're thinking about this. You're kind of just going out there, trusting all the work you've done, and just going to play, and playing for your teammates, playing for yourself, and not in that state of mind where your mind's going in different directions and kind of distracting you from just being out there in the moment, for sure. So I think that might be connected there a little bit, with what he went through.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned about your boys, do they want to be there and are they having fun? And that's another layer of having fun. If we're worried about other people, like the more
Yeah,
layers we can take away, right? And we're just in the moment playing a game, I think that's where the actual passion comes from. That's when we're just playing and we're at our best. And it's amazing how many distractions are out there,
yeah,
right? When we're playing a sport, especially now, that can just take us away
yeah,
from what we all want to be, which is the best hockey player we can be consistently.
yeah.
Uh,
No, for sure.
when you talked about maybe giving up a 2-on-1, right? And then how
Yeah,
that would reflect potentially on you not being a great teammate.
yeah,
Now, let's chat about that because
yeah,
what an interesting concept. Because
yeah,
you probably being your best in your environment, you needed to create offense. Like if you weren't,
yeah.
you also weren't being a great teammate, right? Because you weren't using your
Yeah, in
natural
my
skill
mind, that was probably what I was thinking about.
Well, but for real, right? And so now
Yeah,
even on teams, right? If somebody like there's and I think there might be a fine line between being courageous and then being risky, like so
yeah,
how do you
yeah,
balance that or even for you with you? Like I need to be offensive, I am offensive. This is a gift that I have and this is something I need to provide, yet I don't want to be reckless or
yeah.
risky. Um is that again just being in the moment at the end of the day?
I mean, to sort of put that into words, or what that is precisely, that's really hard to do. Like, and that maybe is why it took me a little time to really kind of fine tune it to understand what is Coach Lemaire really asking here. And I think at the end of the day, it's the same thing as how you win games. You score more than they do, and I guess the next level from that is you get more chances than they do. Now, if you're going to get a chance and then every chance you go get, you give one up, well, you're kind of just treading water, you know? So I think there's just sort of an awareness, like starting to recognize, you could probably try and force some offense anytime, really.
Yeah.
You can always go forward. I think it just comes in learning, like when is a situation, when does it arise where the chances increase for success, rather than forcing something. And I think that's probably what I had to calculate and start to learn, with my skill set. What does that look like? When are the opportunities to take advantage of? What do they look like? When the percentages are, 80% maybe or something of at least creating a chance without being irresponsible defensively, or I don't know what the number is, but
Yeah.
it's a high chance of being successful. It's not like, I could try this, but it might only work 1 out of 10 times. That's not going to fly with Jacques Lemaire. That doesn't fly with winning hockey, because that means 9 out of 10 times the other team's going to get the puck, and they're going back the other way. So you're never going to win hockey games, doing something that might work 1 out of 10 times. I think that's maybe as best I can describe it. And again, it's individual. What are your strengths? As a player, what can you do maybe that another guy can't do, or what can he do that you can't do that changes the odds on one of those situations? They will all be different. And I think that's a personal thing to figure out.
Yeah, I like that you say that actually. I don't think we've never really broken that down on this pod. But the idea, like I know some players get upset because they will try something and say Jimmy tries the same thing. Both guys aren't
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah.
Jimmy doesn't get in shit though.
Yeah.
Johnny does.
Yeah.
And I think that you can actually break that down in the idea of what you just said, right? And be really honest with it. Like
Yeah.
how many times has that ever worked for you if you're the guy that it didn't work? And if the
Yeah.
coach also knows that you might be a 1 out of 10 guy in this
Yeah.
scenario right now, and
Yeah.
Johnny might be a 7 out of 10 guy and it didn't work for him that time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that might be one way to be able to come to it. And then I think the development aspect that you're talking about is really important because like that's where the reps come in practice, off ice, on ice, whatever
Yeah.
the case may be. So
Yeah.
you get comfortable enough and confident enough that now your percentages are in the positive. If I
Right.
do try this in a game, I'm more
Yeah.
likely for it to be successful than not.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think that, I think especially with young kids, talking about this, like, when I was playing as a 12, 13-year-old, our coach, Mr. Bouquet, he didn't want us to give 2-on-1s either, but, he probably wasn't treating me quite the same way that Jacques was, so, and I think that's important, right? The kids need to make mistakes and try stuff, to figure out what we were just talking about. Practice obviously is a great time to really try things, to maybe make mistakes and work on skills that can help you and create offense, whether it's your skating, your stick handling, passing, which, if we get talking about modern day players, that seems to be a lost art, how to pass and receive a pass. It's like, these guys can stick handle in a phone booth, but tough to catch a pass for them, and
Yeah.
that's a still super important part of the game, if not one of the most important parts of creating offense, is being able to move the puck. But I think that's it. At a young age, you kind of gradually get into understanding the importance of not, taking too many chances, but at the same time, you can't take it all away from a young kid. It's kind of probably a progression as you move up the levels. That kind of situation gets, you get tied to a higher standard as you move up the ladder.
Yeah. Yeah. And the pattern recognition is a word that came to mind when you were talking about that too, right? I think the more reps that we get in, the more we mature, like it just
Yeah.
inherently becomes more
Right.
obvious. Like, when
Yeah.
is this opportunity?
Yeah.
I can jump past this defender right
Right.
now. Right. And so I can now create an odd man rush. We have possession.
Yeah.
This is a good time for me to go,
Yeah.
instead of like perpetually forcing, it becomes,
Yeah.
less risk adverse and more
Yeah.
natural, I guess.
For sure.
And I think that kind of means, to me, that's almost boiling down to hockey IQ. And I know now I'm looking at that through the lens. I used to know what hockey IQ was from a player standpoint, because, I really like playing with this guy, or
Right.
maybe we're on the same level, right? Like,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
just kind of knew where we were going. Now, as a coach, it's like, it's so frustrating not to see hockey IQ, right? Like,
Yeah.
how are
Yeah.
you not going there? Why did you not press that puck, right?
Yeah.
Um,
It's
but yeah,
easy on the video. It's easy on the video, and it's easy sitting up high in a rink. You get the
isn't it?
game slow and lots of room. So
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? That is the biggest thing, I think, that disconnect for anyone. Maybe even guys like us that played,
yeah.
to understand that when you're actually in the moment, it's a way different world. It's
Yeah.
happening way faster, and it's definitely harder to see. And we gotta we gotta remind ourselves of that
Yeah.
sometimes, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The You talk about passing. I do think that's a interesting topic, because the NHL is phenomenal still, and obviously it always will be. The way they can move the puck, it's a lot of like one touches off rims now, to guys that they've seen before they even get the puck. Two kind of touch sort of scenarios, tic-tac-toe. Junior is a big step down. The AHL is a more moderate step down. But it is something that just doesn't collectively seem at the youth amateur level to be what it was, as far as, well, yeah, even where to be without the puck, like these types of things. In your coaching capacity now, because you are still involved, how are you trying to implement the idea and that skill of moving the puck past people instead of potentially skating the puck past people?
I think it's just a lot of reminders. It's a lot of maybe, looking at video and saying, did you see these options? That would have been a lot more efficient way of creating offense or moving a puck into a better position than trying to skate it there yourself. In game, maybe having a bit of a discussion after a player gets off their shift. That guy was ahead of you and open, would have been much easier to move it and keep moving yourself. And then you might have been the guy getting the shot, because all the tension would have went to the other player. You get lost, you find open ice, and now you're the goal scorer at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right. So, it's just very much repetition. Like you had mentioned earlier about the highlights and that everybody loves the one-on-one play, but what I love watching, you watch some of the best players in the world and the biggest games of the world. It's the passing, it's the teamwork that creates offense. Not many players in the world at the highest level even can do it consistently enough to have success one-on-one or by themselves. And so to just see some of the plays, and it really even gets down. And when you really get to the top of the heap in the Stanley Cup finals, it's like, is someone screening the goalie? Are we shooting and hitting the goalie's pads for rebounds? I mean, it's pretty boring. Not all that, TikTok worthy, style of hockey, but it's how you win. And so I try and encourage that, point it out to the players, but it is a constant sort of thing. And it's going to take a lot of time and experience for them.
Yeah. The defenseman in the modern game, seems like there's more Scott Niedermeyers that maybe you would speak to. What I mean by that is, there's been a discussion in my Facebook group. I have a parent group on Facebook where people can ask questions and they have conversations. This one lady was talking recently about her son being put on D by the coach, and then how there's this almost looking down your nose at defensemen. Like they seem to be the butt of all the jokes. They're supposed to be less skilled.
Yeah.
They're always the fault of the goal. Like the goalie parents don't like the D because they give up the 2-on-1s, right? The forwards don't like the D because they never get the
Yeah.
puck up, or
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah. Fair enough.
but I think like for you, if you were to start again, like right now, would like what drew you to D in the first place? I guess,
Yeah.
especially in the '90s, you're a guy that can skate, right? You could, you had this high offense, yet there wasn't a lot of you back then that chose D from
Yeah.
from a minor hockey age.
I think I got put back there by either my dad or Coach Bouquet or whoever it was.
Yeah.
I think they said we need defensemen. You want to go back there, and I guess I didn't put up, too much of a fight, and ended up back there and like, oh, this is all right. I don't mind this. Play a bit more and see the game a little bit differently. So I think you're right. I was a forward. I think every hockey player is born a forward or a goalie, and then we find our way to become defensemen somehow, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it has changed. I mean, even just, there is a better level of skill and puck handling overall, in all positions, of the game for sure. I still, there's a lot of defensemen that create a lot of value by defending well. To do that, you have to be able to skate. It does take a level of skill to get pucks out of your end, to move pucks up to the forwards and make plays, to make plays along the blue line in the offensive zone. So, I think there's still many defensemen that aren't your classic sort of total offensive type defenseman that's up the ice a fair bit, but they all have the skill, the ability to make the little play, to move the puck efficiently and effectively, and skate. Because nowadays, I mean, that's one of the massive differences. When I played defense, you didn't really have to be able to skate, or started playing in the NHL. You could hook, hold, slash, cross check. You had a lot of tools at your disposal to slow down offensive guys, and the league has taken all those away. And now it's a matter of positioning, having a good stick, and being able to skate and stay with people. It's a heck of a lot harder to defend now, for sure.
I agree. Yeah, way harder. And it also looks to be like a heck of a lot more fun to play D, from an offensive standpoint side.
Yeah.
Coaches seem much more willing to allow, players to move into the
Yeah.
rush, to have that other layer of offense, the offensive zone cycle. Like there's no one standing on the blue line very much anymore. People are active. So I don't know, to any young players out there, like, and I still think like when you do have that player that moves back, can defend, but now can also add offense, they're still unicorns, right? Yeah, I
Yeah.
think, and I think they stand out a lot. You
Yeah.
can definitely provide a ton of value. So,
Yeah.
as a coach, I try to encourage some of my
Yeah.
offensive players to consider it for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the way the game's played now, there's a lot of interchangeable parts, all over the ice. And, back again, when I started, it really wasn't like that. I used to do a bit of that, and that maybe was why I was getting in trouble a bit with Lemaire, but, trying to do it smartly and learn to do it in a smart fashion. But it really did, make it harder to defend, for the other team, not knowing where someone was, or moving out of a classic position and trying to sort it out on the defensive end. So, and you see that a lot now. I mean, for sure, there's guys moving down and up, and forwards coming up high, and all that stuff's going on. That's, makes the game harder to defend, and does create more offense. But, coaches are always finding ways to defend, and teaching their teams how to do it. So,
hey, I'm curious, random tactical question for you. Net front in your own zone. So when we were coming up, the D was always behind me, cross-checking me in the back, if I was trying to gain position. Now a lot of teams are having the D front the player and try and get between the puck and them, and allowing that offensive player to between him and the goalie. What's your thoughts on that? Do you have a strategy, or what you would coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, again, goes kind of to a personal, what are you comfortable doing? What are your strengths as a defenseman? Some guys don't mind eating pucks. They're coming hard, and a lot of guys are comfortable stepping in front of them and getting their body on it. I think if you're going to do that, that's kind of what you need to do, is not let that puck get past you. On the same side, on the flip side of that, if it does get past you, you're in trouble now, because you've lost position. So I would kind of say, unless you really like to block shots and get in front of that puck and are really good at it. I mean, obviously that's important. You have to be able to do it as well as liking it. I would stay, being on that defensive side as much as possible is never a bad place to be overall.
Okay. I'm glad. Well, I didn't know what I was going to hear from you, obviously, because I mean, there's a lot of NHL guys doing it. It seems like they want
Yeah,
all six of their D to front. I just think like
yeah,
as far as what I was taught and what I coach is like that defensive side of like that
yeah,
really is a key concept that a lot of players don't get. Whether you're
yeah,
forechecking or whether you're in the neutral zone, right? Be above the puck, be
yeah,
above your player. Right now, you have
yeah,
angles. Now you have position. Now you can attack. And now, if you're going to take that concept away, like right in the crease, like that seems
yeah.
absurd to me to do that. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. But there are guys that are big, and they're going to get again 9 out of 10 pucks are not going to make it through them.
Yeah.
And they've found a way to have success, playing in that style, and it helps the team. So I think that's hockey in a nutshell. Like that would be one of my more consistent themes. Is that I think you mentioned it earlier. There isn't just one way to do anything. Ultimately, I think there are some concepts that remain pretty consistent and true to at least where you should start from.
Yeah.
But obviously, if you recognize you've given up that defensive position in front of the net, you now have no choice but to get that puck and not let it get to the offensive player behind you. I mean, that's as simple as that. So it doesn't leave much room for error. I kind of like, where you're in position where you do have room for error, or you can help and help another player, or you're just in a good position where not only he's going to have to get around you, but you still have options to defend from that position.
Yeah. I guess the thing you do have access to potentially on the wrong side of them is you do have to get a stick. I mean, if you can get a stick, then I guess you're somewhat okay. If you can turn and you have access to a stick
Yeah.
and there's a rebound there, like you still have that fighting chance. So I do
Yeah.
understand that premise. But
Yeah.
where if we're talking to young D-men right now, as far as from a skill set thing that I mean, if you would suggest that they dial in, 1, 2, and 3, if you can do these things, you can almost play anywhere, or someone's going to recognize you. Like, well, what would those things be? Sorry to put you on the spot with this, but I'm sure it'll
Yeah.
come naturally to you.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's the first one's, I mean, I don't know if it answers your question totally, but it's what stands out to me. And it's kind of just the intensity and focus it takes to defend in your own end consistently. I think that's something that young defensemen always need to work on. It's pretty common to see, the pucks in your end, maybe not right in your position or whatever, and there's sort of a relaxation. Maybe you lift your stick up, you straighten your legs, you kind of just take a moment, to maybe grab a bit of oxygen or whatever. But the best defenders are always adjusting. They're always reading where the offensive players are, where the puck is, where your teammates are, so that when something does come, when the puck does maybe make its way to your position or your man, that you've already moved into position to be effective and make your job easier. And I think that is something that is a tough sell, for young players. They're like, well, unless my guy sort of has the puck or my position's where the action is, I'm just going to sort of watch and see what's happening. And then the puck pops into a position, and now you react, where it's like, am I anticipating that? Am I moving into position a little bit, to maybe anticipate a puck coming behind the net or into a different place? So I think that not so much a skill, I guess it is a skill, but just sort of, having an awareness and a focus in your own end to always be adjusting to give yourself the best chance to defend, would be number one. Probably another thing, I mean, I mentioned awareness in that, sort of combined with that focus, compete, awareness. And after that is use of your stick. I think at all times your stick should be in a position where it's there for a reason, taking away a passing lane, discouraging someone to skate into a position, whatever way you can use your stick. It's you have it, you might as well use it to your advantage. So I think those are the two things that really stand out, to me.
Yeah, that's your second point. There is something that I noticed in my own progression and recognizing defensemen the longer that I played was the ones that were really would give me fits weren't necessarily the guys that were big, strong, whatever. It was like their stick position that was always in an annoying place, right? To either make the pass or get around them. And some of the best come to mind, like Nick Lidstrom was a genius at it, right?
Yes.
Like it's just a genius at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, I mean, stick is such a valuable tool to use. And I think I love your idea there of that. I mean, really, it's a mental skill, what you said, right? To be able to think
exactly.
and to read, and obviously that's up my alley. But the idea too is like, how often do you see a player get to that puck, maybe even they defend well enough, but they haven't considered the information available to them, and now they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah,
That's a
Right.
big one, right?
Yep.
Like now you've finally broken up the rush or the cycle or whatever it is. Like you've ended a play, but if you
Yeah.
can't start another one, it doesn't make
Yeah.
any difference really.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I, sort of talking about that awareness, it wasn't only about the offensive guys, it was where are my guys, where's the open ice? Who's the open man? So yeah, once the play happens or we change possession or I'm able to take it off this guy, what can I do with it?
Yeah.
And I think offensive players, there's a bit more of a motivation to do that, because it's sort of always been part of sort of the game and having success offensively is making those predictions and adjustments to get into position. I think it's pretty much exactly the same thing on the defensive end. It's maybe just not, it doesn't seem as important when you're 12 years old
Yeah.
or even 16 or 18 or 20 for that matter,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. And I think as far as those time windows can, decrease every level up. And I
yeah,
think that's where the reads do start to matter.
yeah,
And if we can
right.
instill this as coaches to these younger players, you have more time. If you get to the puck and now you have to have your head up, now you have to find somebody, your feet are
Yeah,
probably in the wrong spot, your hands are in the wrong spot to move that puck. Yet if we can get there, know where we're going with it, that happens at the NHL
yeah,
level all the time. By the time they get the puck, they already know where it's going. Like, they
yeah,
have to know, right? Or else it just
yeah,
breaks down. So that skill under pressure, skill in small areas, and being able to read what you're doing. So that's the idea of thinking one step ahead. So for everyone out there listening, yeah, like not what's happening right now, but what's happening next, right? Like
yeah.
how do you think about what's happening next and how you can make that play? Short break from the conversation with Scott to look at the calendar and see, oh my goodness, it's already January 13th. And what does that mean? That means that associations, teams, junior programs, academies, associations are all looking ahead and doing their planning for the 2025-2026 season that's going to start in the fall. And if you are a program or an association that does not have personal development and mindset training involved in your competitive divisions, you are behind the eight ball and you are missing an absolutely key component of the development model. Now, Up My Hockey can fill that gap for you. It's a plug and play scenario. You don't have to lean on your coaches. It can be, a unionized, well, unionize is the wrong word. It can be a standardized curriculum for your players as they move from U13, U15, U18, that you have the personal development and mindset curriculum covered that is going to allow your player to grow within your association, within your teams. It will be a reason to keep players in your association and teams, and it will be something that the players and coaches will be very thankful that they had available to them. So if you are somebody that is a decision maker or somebody who writes checks to decision makers and you don't have mindset training involved in your program, then by all means, reach out to them. They can reach out to me, upmyhockey.com. We are taking phone calls all throughout the month, January and February, to see if it is a good fit for Up My Hockey and your place of residence to work together. It's a really exciting time. The amount of players that I've seen go through this program now and the amount of teams that I've worked with of all ages has truly made a remarkable impact. It helps set culture. It helps redefine what a challenge is. There's opportunities where they weren't seen before. How to be a teammate. The culture in the room changes. The resilience of the team. How they handle practice and their own personal development. It really can be a game changer. And this is something that happens over 8 weeks in a team program. So by all means, throw your hat in the ring. Let's see if it's a good fit. Upmyhockey.com. Reach out there through the contact form, or jason@upmyhockey.com is another way to get a hold of me through email. And I would be happy to set up a discovery call and see where we can take it. 2025-26. It's crazy. It's going to happen before we know it. Now let's get back to my conversation with Scott Niedermeyer. What's your message to players out there as far as a smaller defenseman, Scott, that needs to be able to end plays as well? Doesn't necessarily have to be physical potentially, but can't just contain, right? We've all seen that defenseman that maybe stays on the D side, but never ever is able to disrupt possession, and you're in your end for what seems like ever. How do they go about mastering their craft?
Yeah. I mean, I think you obviously have, well, just different tools, I guess, to defend and try and, break plays up and kind of change possession. Most little defensemen, I imagine, I think there's different ways. You're skating. Maybe you can use that to angle and sort of take time away and put someone in a bad spot, or maybe recover, from a poke check or an attempt at a check that doesn't work. But, your skating allows you to recover to get a second crack at the same player. Use of your stick, smarts, anticipation, I think are sort of the other one, like a hockey sense thing. And, you're maybe are containing for a little bit. And then you're like, okay, I see he's kind of lulled him into a position or whatever. And now I'm going to anticipate that and get a stick on it, or maybe use the body at that point and recognize that, even though I'm smaller, I have the angle, I have the leverage, and I can now, end this play here. So it is important. It is much harder than it used to be. I mean, you could hook and hold and do all those things before, but it really does take smarts. It takes some skill with your skating, with your stick, to be able to do that. And obviously it's tremendously helpful when you are able to end plays. I would say the risk there is if you're being too aggressive as a young player or smaller player, and you kind of get flipped around to the other side, or you get caught, and giving them chances up that way. So you really do have to be smart. It kind of goes back to, we were talking about making decisions offensively to have the most success. It's kind of the same thing when you're defending. Like, is this actually going to work 9 out of 10 times when I go in now to try and take the body on this guy because I have angle and position on him? Or am I really taking a 2 out of 10 opportunity here to see if it happens, and it doesn't happen? So somewhat similar, I guess, in making those calculations.
Yeah. Yeah, when you mentioned getting on the wrong side, just for everyone listening, again, we're talking about that body position, and it's a difference of like 6 to 12 inches, and it means the world, in quick games that happen fast. And when you lose body position, you lose access to the net, you lose access to the puck, and it really does make a huge difference when we can think in terms of that from offense and defense, and that transition. You get 12 inches, and there's a difference, like a big difference on both sides. I guess that's the challenge. I mean, whether you're big or small, I want to extend that challenge of try to end plays if you can. I think that's really a hallmark of a defenseman. Yes, you want to stay on the D side. Yes, you want to contain, but at some point somebody needs to stop the play from happening. And I think that's sort of a mental idea of what it is D are trying to accomplish. And I think sometimes they forget that.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe because we're telling them to not give up chances, so they're kind of like, I don't want to take this risk to maybe get caught out of position. I think that could be part of it. I think, it is hard. It is hard to defend now, right? Like, you make just a subtle little mistake on either your angle or body position, like you just mentioned, you now are at a bad position and maybe giving up a scoring chance. So I could see where there is this tendency to kind of be conservative but I think it goes back, you mentioned earlier about in practice, that's a great time to kind of try things and kind of start to gauge, what can I do? What can't I do? And make mistakes in practice and try and defend maybe more aggressively than you do in a game. And, like, I can actually make that type of play. That's a play I can do, 90% of the time and have success. I'll use it in a game successfully after that. So I think it's similar to what we were talking about earlier. And, but you don't want to be hemmed in your zone for a minute or two. That's for sure. That wears you out.
When it comes to confidence, it's something that comes up time and time again. The players want more of it. As professionals, we wanted it. There's times where we didn't feel like we had it. And it seems to be sometimes this elusive, tangible thing that, it's stuck in our closet somewhere and we just haven't been able to see it through the other shirts hanging. How did you come to that ideation of confidence and maybe your perception of it or how you grew it?
Yeah, I mean, it is important. And it's a strange thing for sure. In some ways, you're never really at one level of it. I think it's kind of always increasing or decreasing or, changing. Even when, you're at the top of your game, as a pro, or at least in that realm of your career, in mid to late 20s, and probably never been better at the game. There's probably still moments, for sure. There's moments where you wish your confidence was more, or your confidence is a little weaker than it would be in the best case scenario. I think consistent time, practice, success, I think over time, and benefiting from that work you're putting in, I think that gives you at least a base layer of confidence and sort of knowing what I can do and what I'm capable of.
Yeah.
But I guess chicken or the egg kind of thing. I mean, I think it has to be earned ultimately. I know probably, you can get a little bit from coaches, putting you in situations and showing trust in you, and that obviously creates it as well. But I think you have to just recognize the work you're putting in, and that's where it has to start, competing and getting out there doing your best, to at least give yourself a chance to succeed, and then feel confident and good about that.
Yeah. I like you talked about the practice or the base layer. There's different layers. Like I think habits, like your personal habits, which seem to evolve and really cement as a pro. And the farther you get to understand what it means to be professional, in your eyes, or what it means to be a Hall of Famer. Like there's different habits that guys have. And I think that, at least to me, it seems like the guys that have a little bit more foundational confidence, let's call it, usually have really fantastic habits.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. In the sense of how can I give myself a chance to go out and be my best? Now what kind of preparation is that before the game mentally, the day before in practice? Am I putting the work in? Am I building those habits that I do on a daily basis so that when I go out on the game, I'm going to have the best chance to have success? And when you have a little bit of success, the confidence just grows and you feel good about it, rather than going into a game maybe a bit underprepared. You didn't put the work in the last 2 days in practice. You kind of backed off your intensity or your effort, whatever it may be. And you go into a game and all of a sudden you're a step behind. Your plays you're not making. Well, now your confidence is dropping, right? So I think you're exactly right. I think there is a real way you can actually build it and kind of give it the best chance to flourish. And that's put that work in with habits and sort of build that thing from it takes time. Like you said, It's hard to, have a 12-year-old that's got it all dialed in their habits. And you're right. I probably didn't have my habits dialed in till mid to late, maybe 26 or something like that, where I'm like, okay, I kind of have this 90% dialed where I know what it takes now. So
the mistakes is another one that shows up, and it's an individual thing, and it's an individual experience with it. What they mean to us, what the impact's ultimately going to be on our game in that moment, whether it be that period or the game as a whole. When it comes to someone that ended up being at your level, hockey is a game of mistakes. I tell younger players now to watch Connor McDavid. Like there's multiple turnovers every night. But this guy's amazing. But he's attacking, and he makes a lot of good plays too. So perfection is unattainable. That's for sure. But what did a mistake mean to you, or how did you overcome a mistake? Was that something that ever, impacted you to a point that you got in trouble with it sometimes?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that there is, and even for each individual, you handle it different ways at different times. Yeah. I think for the most part, I was lucky that my natural instinct was, if I made a mistake, I wanted just to go out that much more and try and make something good happen. That was a natural kind of reaction I had to mistakes for the most part. Not always. I mean, sometimes you put your head down, especially if you've, suffered a few of them, in a row or whatever the case may be. It's not always easy to do that, but I think in general, that was my response was like, okay, that happened. Well, let's go out and try and, make something positive happen or be better. That was it. But, when they were repetitive and you kind of get in that point of the season or whatever it is, where things really for game after game haven't seemed to be going well, it is hard to kind of dig back out of a mistake and not let it weigh you down, for sure. That is a difficult challenge to deal with at certain times, for sure.
I like what you said there, though. I believe I like to provide choices, right, for players in the moment. And I think that what you just said there, maybe what your natural instinct was, can also be a choice if it's not the natural instinct of a player.
Yeah.
That the mistake now represents an opportunity for you to go out and make a positive impact.
Yeah.
And that's how you identify with yourself. So, now that mistake becomes an opportunity to be something better. And I do believe, like, if we have that mental change of focus, now this thing isn't something that we necessarily have to have our head between our legs on the bench about and feel bad. It doesn't mean that another mistake is going to come. It doesn't mean that we're having a bad game and that we're going to get benched, right? It can actually mean that this could be the piece of the puzzle that actually pushes me forward. So I think that's great that and maybe fortunate, right? That was your natural kind of tendency to handle that. But I think that's a super powerful one. Like that is a choice that we can make.
Yeah. And I think too, sometimes, a little bit of, I don't know, maybe pain's not the right word, but discomfort and frustration, that is how you learn and get better. And in those moments, I think, like you asked earlier about sort of that one moment of my career we talked about, but I don't know if I would have learned that just by words and pat on the back. I probably had to feel some discomfort and frustration to really analyze and really sort of take it in a real fashion. So, you're going to have ups and downs, and that's part of it. You're going to feel frustrated, and those are learning opportunities and hopefully make you better down the road ultimately.
That is it. And I think if players out there, if they're going through something right now, can just even hear that hope, like recognize it, that this thing that feels crappy, that sucks, that's making you question all these things and your confidence is low, that could be the biggest gift you might ever have right now. You just got to find a way to get through, go ahead.
Just keep working, right? Like, it's hard. It's hard to do. It's frustrating. And, like back to what I talked about earlier about that stretch for me, it was a long time. It was 2 years. There was probably weeks where I was kind of doing it and working through. And then there was probably another week where I'm like, what am I doing? I'm lost again, or I'm sitting on the bench again. And it was probably many attempts, many failures, pick yourself back up, fall again, up again, down again. And, like I said, years later, I kind of at least got part of the message. And, that is part of the journey and what makes it special, I guess, to sort of figure some things out. So
with regards to the players I work with, I try and get them to check in on what they're proud of, what they're doing well. I think a lot of us, especially high performers, we're critical by nature, right? We want perfection and we're striving and we're pushing, which can sometimes blind us to what we're actually have accomplished and what we're doing well, and maybe some of the habits that we've changed about ourselves that are giving us some of the successes that we're experiencing. So I'm gonna shine that light on you. I mean, tons of stuff to be proud of in your career, but like, what if you could boil it down to one or two moments or things? Like, what are you proud of from your time, either as a player or as a person that you learned from in your time in the game?
Yeah, geez, the question. I don't know if I've ever been asked such a. I don't know. It's sort of like, well, what did you like winning this or winning that? But I don't know. I guess ultimately, something I have said before is about, proud of, I think, being a good teammate, and knowing that guys felt I sort of cared about them and about the team. And that was something I think I did and did all right. Probably could have been better for sure. Like your client, it's about being a great teammate. I'm sure I could have been a better teammate. I'm sure that was possible. And I guess maybe just, taking my journey with my talents and trying to do the best I could with them, which I think I did my best at. Did I perfect it? No, for sure. You never do. But, I think I sort of took advantage of them and tried to use them in a constructive way. So I guess those would be some things I'm somewhat proud of, and beyond being part of successful teams.
That's awesome. Yeah. And being a part of a successful team has to say something about, everyone on that team and yourself in particular, because there is some of those personal human attributes that we talked about earlier that have to be present. I mean, you have to be selfless in some type of way. You have to be willing to sacrifice. You have to be willing to put someone else ahead and to talk about them and to celebrate them. And so there's a lot of cool things that happen with winning that I think we sometimes we overlook about ourselves, which is why, I thought it would be, well, why not ask you that question? Because I think they're good things to revisit, and I think when we can share those stories and have those types of discussions, like these are also, again, choices that somebody else can potentially choose. I want to be proud of doing that too,
Yeah. I think, like you said, like being part of that's really over time, been 14 years since I retired. And it's really your perspective on playing, for me at least, really changed. Like when I was playing, it was kind of just focused on what do I got to do. And that was it. I wasn't really thinking about big pictures, thinking about last year or any of that sort of thing. And then when you retire, you kind of have you can kind of flip at it and look, flip it around and look at it and kind of think about, geez, what was all that? And people always say, well, you were, you were on these teams that did all these things, but I really kind of just said I tried to do the best I could with my small role on those teams, and everybody else there for the most part did exactly what I was doing. That's why we had success. So, to kind of just talk about that team success when you're talking about me, well, I just did my little part. That's really what I came to recognize, and which I guess I always knew. But when there's this constant sort of talk about you're on all these winning teams, yeah, I was, along with like 25 other players and coaches and a whole group of people that were doing exactly what I was doing, and that's kind of what I really thought a lot about after I retired, for sure.
That makes it special, being in a bunch of a like-minded group.
Yeah.
Has a lot of impact. Speaking of impact, is there a coach or a player or a teammate that was instrumental for you that you can look back on and being like, oh yeah, I'm really glad he was in my life?
Yeah. I mean, many. I think that sort of stems just from what I was just talking about. I mean, the amount of good, committed teammates, committed to the team and the way they played, the way they conducted themselves. I think all the way along, right from playing minor hockey in Cranbrook with, committed, good, other teammates that we pushed each other. We enjoyed each other. We were committed to each other playing, even when we were 10, 12 years old. Into junior, Ken Hitchcock was my coach, Tom Rennie, guys that have had success as coaches that I was able to learn from. The teammates there, again, were tremendous, and I learned a lot from them. And then the same thing in pro hockey. I really, looking back again from that type of perspective of a retired guy, I couldn't have really been more fortunate, and just, if you could pick yourself up and just drop yourself in a spot that would be ideal to learn the things you need to learn, I was in those spots. And, so I was very lucky in that fashion. I imagine I was kind of reflecting or giving some of that back to the situation too, but I really was in good spots with an organization with the right goals and approach to achieving them, all the way down to the staff, the equipment guys. They were all in it together, and I was part of it. So,
yeah. One of the messages with Up My Hockey, and kind of even what this podcast is my little version of trying to give back to a game and make a game better, that provided me with so much. And it's one of the messages that I have with the clients that I work with. And actually it was just one of the topics that we had in our inner circle call the other day is gratitude for the game, gratitude to the sport, and what can we do to make it better? Whether you're 12 or whether you're 19 or whether you're a pro, and you're in a situation where 20-year pro, all the accolades, all the things. You're on this podcast, not for you, probably for me, and probably for my listeners. Do you sort of have that underlying thought too, that, this game has been pretty great, and I really do want to try and make it a better place, even though I'm not playing it anymore?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like when I was playing, I looked at coaches a certain way. I definitely look at them different now, and recognize the things that they taught me and the things I benefited from all of the coaches I had. When you're a player and a coach, there's always this push and pull and a little confrontational in some respects. Definitely back when I was playing, they're holding you accountable and, sometimes making things a little uncomfortable or you're different from your viewpoint, for sure. And, but then again, when I retired, you kind of take it all in and you're like, geez, I had a ton of guys like you asked me about that really helped me along the way. Teammates, coaches, other people in the organization that spent a little extra time or taught me something or whatever it was, or gave me a pat on the back after a tough night, whatever it was. And, so to be able to kind of do the same thing for somebody or try to, does feel good. As you kind of move through life and get on the other side of that circle somewhere, I kind of have exactly the same thoughts you just said about trying to give some of that back that so many people gave to me. And, it's enjoyable to see. It's enjoyable to see young players, taking some of that and learning and growing as people and players. It's a rewarding thing to do.
Yeah, it's super rewarding.
Yeah,
it's kind of the most fun I find. Like when you see a player find value and self-esteem in themselves, because of whatever new decisions that they're doing, that's also resulting in something that's really important to them, being a good hockey player and helping their team win hockey games. Like I don't know, like I love that aspect of it, and to be some small piece of that, to help them do that is is pretty exciting and a great way to go to sleep at night sometimes. So
Yeah. I guess we're part of a big team, right?
Yeah.
And no different than being on a small hockey team or a bigger team of coaches and, citizens of the planet. So yeah, absolutely. I enjoy it a lot. And, those moments when you do see sort of that success or that confidence or the play work or the situation, or you start to see habits form of these young guys that help them along. It's a great feeling. Absolutely.
That's fantastic. Is there any last message? I've kept you for an hour and 20 or 15 here already. So, thank you for your time. Is there any last messages for some players that would hope to maybe, put on that junior jersey or a NCAA jersey or an NHL jersey one day?
Yeah. I don't know. We've covered a lot of it, right? But, I guess I would say, sort of tip my hat to a lot of these youngsters now. I mean, the world they live in is way different than we grew up in, right? Like what they have to deal with, and with whether it's social media and just awareness of all these things going on. Like I said, when I grew up, we barely knew any other players. We'd go to these tournaments and kind of watch this other team play, and you're like, oh, that guy's a good player. Like, what's his name? I don't know. Or like, where now these guys know everybody, and there's these camps and all this stuff. It's always going on. And I think what I really wish and hope is that they are having the same type of experience that I did when I was 12, 14, 16, 18 years old, that, they're enjoying themselves. They're having fun with their teammates and playing a great game. I guess ultimately that's what I hope for them. If that leads them to wherever it does down the road, that would be great. But the number one thing that they can think back when they get to be our age and think, geez, that was a lot of fun. Those guys, those friends, those teammates, we enjoyed ourselves. And made many great memories together. So I think that would probably be my number one hope for all these young players, that they can say that down the road for sure.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, I think that passion happens with that. Enthusiasm and fun. Again, but not discounting the adversity. That's going to be a part of it,
Yeah.
and we have to understand that is going to be
Yeah.
there. But the underlying idea is that you're playing a game and you got involved in it for a reason. So no matter how good you want to be, no matter, what mistakes you have made, that playing where your skates are and being in the dressing room and enjoying that moment in whatever capacity you can is only going to support your own personal journey.
Yeah. I think when you're doing something you love and you come to that road block or the speed bump or whatever, yeah, it's hard and frustrating, but you're going to have a little extra in the tank to kind of try and push through or over whatever you have to, just because of that love and passion for what you're doing. So awesome. Because it is coming, you're right. The challenges are coming. That's life. That's hockey. There's going to be tough stretches, but if it's something you really love, they just seem more insignificant, really, smaller, and you just find a way to figure it out.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for shooting the shit with us here on Up My Hockey, and I'm sure there's a lot of great lessons for everyone listening today.
No, happy to do it. It was great. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Thank you so much for being here. That was not hard at all to listen to. My goodness, if you are a hockey geek, fan, parent, player, and you have the opportunity to have the ear of somebody like Scott Niedermeyer for, what was that, an hour and 15 minutes? My goodness, I think we are all better off than we were 75 minutes ago. I'm super grateful personally to be able to ask the questions and to have the reins in that conversation. That was really special for me to be a part of, and try and get as much as we can out of that brain of Scott's. Boy, the things that he has seen, the places he has played, the things that he has won. It really is remarkable, and it was really a blessing to have him on. Lots of takeaways there. I love him talking about his coach, and how he had to play within himself and how he had to create himself into this idea of a team player when he felt that he could have been giving more. Like, boy, this is from Scott Niedermeyer. I'm sure this is something that can be taken away from everybody in a car right now or wherever you're listening on your headset, player, parent, what have you. The idea that we are in a team sport, and that's one of the beautiful things that makes it so special, that no matter how good you are, you need to be part of the group. And sometimes being part of the group and part of winning as a group is taking some selfless acts and figuring it out. And that's what Scott Niedermeyer did. He figured it out. He had to play within himself. He didn't get maybe the star quality minutes. He wasn't able to rush as maybe he was able to, but he was forced to learn the game the way his coach wanted him to, and he was able to find that trust with his coach, even though there was some resistance involved along the way. But him looking back on that now says those were the most formative years for him, the years that he was most frustrated, that potentially allowed him to step into the Hockey Hall of Fame player that he was and the winner that he was. So, great lesson there. I love that one. And maybe we'll just leave you with that. If it's good for Scott Niedermeyer, I'm sure it's good for you. So play hard and keep your head up.